Hey, everybody. Welcome to the book club podcast. We're sharing it over on the For the Love site for everybody else, but this is where we do all things JHBC. We have just the most amazing book club. We are in our fifth year. Yeah, golly. And month after month, we just read some of the best novels and memoirs and the occasional nonfiction books that have just ever been written. We have the best time. And this month, we had a banger of a book. We absolutely loved The Berry Pickers. Let me tell you about the author who I am interviewing today, Amanda Peters. She's Canadian, and she is of the Mi'kmaq and European ancestry and lives in Nova Scotia. This is her debut novel, The Berry Pickers, and I'm just telling you, it shot up in the charts. It just got selected for awards and book clubs, and it was such a compelling, original, unique story. I read it last November and immediately got it, pulled it out of the pile and went, we want this for book club for sure. Let's get it in as soon as we can. The Berry Pickers, just one in a long list, won the 2024 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. Huge deal. This is her first novel. So really, really amazing. Amanda holds a Master's of Fine Arts from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she also has a certificate in creative writing from the University of Toronto. She still lives and writes in Nova Scotia. She is a college instructor now, and she shares powerful Indigenous stories. And you'll hear us talk about it, of course, but her dad was Indigenous, and which is where the whole premise of the novel came from, was his lived experience as a child in an Indigenous family, going down to Maine in the summers to pick berries. He and the 14 siblings. So I'm not going to say any more because we're going to unpack it, but I will just say that The Berry Pickers was one of those books in book club that seems to be almost like universally liked. You know, we're a book club. We don't always like all the same books, and some people love one and other people this one is just resonant, and everybody's like, couldn't put it down. And so I'm delighted to have her on the podcast today, and was just fascinated to hear her process and what it's like to have such major success right out of the gate. So without any further ado, let's welcome Amanda Peters to the show. Okay, Amanda, I'm just delighted to meet you. Thank you for being with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So I have a girlfriend, her name is Jessica, and she and I are both just voracious readers. And she is one of my primary book recommenders. Okay. So when she sends me a text, you need to read this, I think with no exceptions. I don't even ask what it's about. I don't ask for a summary. I just open up my Amazon cart and I do click one, buy now, and it's there the next day. So anyway, she texted me last fall about The Berry Pickers and said, I got a live one for you. And I was like, don't need to know what it's about. Joop. So I read it in November in 2 days. It's one of those. It's a 2-sit read. It would have been one had life not interfered.
Right, yeah, life.
And then I texted my my book club team, and I was like, how soon can we get this book in book club? What's the earliest month we can get it all sorted out so we can have it in book club? It's just phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Made more interesting for me to know that it's your debut novel. I cannot be rating that right.
Yeah, it's my first novel.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of surprising how it's being received. I'm just like, oh. wow.
I mean, it's a writer's dream. It's a novelist's
Oh
dream for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
To
for sure.
You don't know. You don't know. I mean, you write your little book and you put it in the world, and then the world's going to do whatever it's going to do with it.
Yeah.
But the amount of acclaim and attention and praise that your novel just boom got out of the gate, just it has to feel good.
It does, but
Yeah,
I still feel like I'm gonna wake up or someone's gonna pinch me and like what is going on? Because when I wrote it, it's like maybe my mom and dad will read it, maybe get a little bit of
totally,
attention here in Nova Scotia, and
totally
now it's in 22 languages, so it's crazy.
amazing. Oh,
Yeah,
congratulations and well deserved. It
thank
is
you.
riveting. It's interesting.
Mm,
Your plot is original.
yeah.
So I mean, I had to just keep. I was just dying to know how's it going to go. What's going to
Yeah.
happen with these characters? I was hoping, of course, for the ending that you got us to,
Hmm.
but just really, really well done. So let's just start at the top here. I'd like to hear you talk about just the inspiration
Mm.
for the berry pickers. And I can see obviously a lot of connective tissue here between this story and your life, but I'd love to hear like, was it a spark? Was it a moment? How did it come to you? All of it.
All of it. Okay. I actually love telling this story, but basically, my dad was a Mi'kmaq berry picker in the 60s and 70s in Maine with his family, his parents, and his siblings. There are 14 of them, not five
Wow.
as in the book, but
Yeah.
and they would go down. And so I've grown up listening to these stories, the same ones over and over and over again as dads do. And
That's right.
he said, "You should write about us." And I was like, "I write fiction, Dad.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't write nonfiction." But he took me to the berry fields in Maine in
yeah.
2017, and we went down there, father-daughter trip. He showed me the fields, told me the same stories, but they had something different then, like
Mm.
seeing the place
Yeah.
and hearing the stories. And when I was down there, the line, "The day that Ruthie went missing, the black fly seemed to be especially hungry."
Hmm.
I just wrote it down. I was like, okay, maybe there is a story here. Let's
Wow.
see it. And so, yeah, that's how it came about. Just, it's fiction. It's not based on my
Sure.
dad's stories. It was inspired by all of
Yeah.
his crazy stories. Yeah.
I mean, so you are just saying that just standing right there in those fields, even the name Ruthie just came to you, just fully formed.
Fully
Like,
formed. Hmm.
could you even grab that idea by the tail at that moment, or were you like, "What is this gonna be? Let's see what my brain unfolds."
Let's just see what happens,
My
basically. And I
gosh.
wrote it and I thought it was a short story for 2 years. So, yeah. And then
Mm.
everybody who read it kept saying, it's not a short story, it's a novel. You have to keep going. I'm like, no, I can't write a novel. That's hard. That's hard work. But I said, okay, let's see what happens if I try, see where this goes. So,
I mean, they were right.
yeah,
They
of
were
course. Yeah,
correct.
yeah. My dad, he hasn't said I told you so, which is good for him.
Good on him. That was probably a lot of restraint for him
Hmm.
to hold that one back. Just amazing. I love hearing novelists talk about their creative process and how the stories come to them. And so that sentence drops into your brain fully formed.
Hmm.
And I'd love to hear you talk about the development of the other characters and how the storyline came to you. Did it kind of come in like that first sentence, fairly fully baked? Or
Right.
did it come to you chapter by chapter? Did it surprise even you as the story sort of presented itself?
Yeah, very much so, because when I originally wrote it and I had it all outlined, it was just Joe's story. There
Hmm.
was no Norma's story in it, right? And so I had about 3 chapters of Joe done. There's just a little voice in my head saying, I want to tell my story.
Oh
I
gosh.
was like, I wonder if she has a story. So I did the terrifying thing that writers do, sit in front of a blank screen on your
Totally.
computer. And I have an iMac, so it's like this massive big screen. So I just sat there and I was like, okay, waited for it to come. And I just
Wow.
started to write. And I was like, okay, apparently this girl has a story. So I had to throw out that outline
Huh?
and do a new one. But I didn't know where it was going to go. So sometimes I was very defined. This is what I want to happen. Other times I just let my imagination go where it wanted to go.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Joe a little bit because he's complicated.
He
And you
is.
wrote him as such. And I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I always appreciate when a writer gives us a character that we kind of have to grapple with.
Hmm.
And where at parts along the way, we're not sure if we're for him or against him. We're not sure
Yeah.
if we like him or we're mad at him. And sometimes it's both. And that's how Joe was for me. Like,
Yeah.
I had such this deep, like, well of compassion for him. And then
Hmm.
other times I just wanted to throttle him.
Yep. Yep. That
And a
was
lot
the
of,
intent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was beautiful. I loved that. So Joe was really your first full character that you
He
worked
was.
with.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him? How'd you feel about writing him? How'd you feel about his being his creator?
Yeah, I love Joe, and I get some people who say they loved him or they hated him, and everybody has their different opinions, but I obviously loved him. And I wanted to write a character who's flawed.
Yeah.
I had a mentor tell me it's a really brave of you to write a book with all terrible characters. And I was like, they're
Ah,
not
that's funny.
terrible. They're flawed. They're deeply flawed
They're
characters.
human.
They're human, and we're all
Yeah,
flawed, and we're
that's
all
right.
human. And I wanted people to see this deeply flawed person,
Yeah,
and but still have empathy for the situation that he was in, like the guilt he carried for
yeah,
so long. So yeah, it was. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this." I read my Goodreads, which you're not supposed to do. But people are like, "This isn't a mystery at all." I'm like, "It was never a mystery. It's a
that's right.
character study."
Yeah,
Is what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be like one event happens, and what is the ripple
yeah.
effect of that through the years?
Yeah, I appreciated that because you showed the corrosive effect of guilt
Hmm.
and shame, what it will do in a life, decade
Yeah.
after decade, unresolved or unaddressed. And
Yeah.
that felt honest to me.
It's like the snowball effect, right? It just
Uh-huh.
keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger if you don't address it, if you don't melt it
Yeah,
down a bit. So yeah.
absolutely. I want to helicopter out real quick. We're going to come drop back into the story here in a second. But
Hmm.
you obviously have this, incredible resume with writing and with
Hmm.
creating. And so I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about what you were doing before we got to the berry pickers? And you're like,
Oh.
no, it's a short story. Oh, damn it. God, it's a novel. What am I going to do? That's hard. So what was your career like before this novel?
Yeah, so I worked in Indigenous governance and administration for years. I worked as a senior health policy analyst for, I represented the 37 chiefs here in Atlantic Canada. Then I went on and I worked for my own community of Glooskap First Nation as the band administrator and the CEO. Then I went on to the First Nations Financial Management Board here in Canada,
Yeah.
and yeah, I worked there for 3 years, all the while taking school,
Yeah.
doing a certificate from the University of Toronto in creative writing,
Yeah.
and then my MFA from the Institute for American Indian Arts. So
It's pretty
yeah,
incredible.
it
It's
was it
pretty
was busy.
impressive.
It was very busy, very busy. That's for sure.
Did you all along have sort of a long game in your mind to be a novelist? Because even you resisted your own project here for a while.
I just wanted to write. I never anticipated, like, I was like, it'd be so cool just to finish, like, to actual write a novel. I didn't care if anybody ever saw it. I knew that I was like, oh, look, I could do this. And then when I got a publishing deal, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. That's so exciting. And then, as you know, it kind of went nuts,
It went nuts.
and now I'm just loving it.
Yeah, you must be. I appreciate you talking about that because obviously, the book discusses the displacement of Indigenous families
Hmm.
and the impact of colonialism, and which obviously you have both family history with, and then that's been your career. I mean, your
Yeah.
career has been an advocate and a leader in the community. And so, did you just was that an automatic weaving for you to pull in like all these? I can only imagine all this information that you are sitting on to go, how can I locate this in a story about a family?
Yeah, I actually, I tell people I couldn't have written this story when I was 21, right? Because I didn't have the life experience. I
Yeah.
didn't have working with my communities. I didn't have the experience of sitting in a circle with residential school survivors and hearing their stories. So I couldn't have written anything that I wrote when I
That's
was
right.
younger. Even though I loved writing back then, it just wouldn't have happened. And with this one, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Well, you did it masterfully. I mean,
Oh.
even as a reader, before I had done a deep dive on you to learn about, wait, who's this author who can write with such eloquence and obvious insider knowledge of such a story. It leapt off the page, and we felt as readers. It's my book club right now. We're toward the back end of reading together. It was our March selection, obviously,
Ah,
and
okay.
it's so interesting to be in the book club group. Just the response to your story is really strong,
Oh, good.
and even though most of us don't have personal
Hmm.
experience, with this story, but you've given it to us, you handed it to us
Yeah,
in
and
a way
and
that's accessible.
and I tell my students, because now I teach
Yeah.
creative writing in English at Acadia University here in Nova Scotia, and I tell my students, and half joking but half not, fiction readers are just better people, because
There's some science behind that.
well, I tell them that I was like,
Yes,
because it helps us develop
that's
empathy, and
right.
we can empathize with people who are not like us. But also, literature is about the human condition,
That's
essentially.
right.
Literary fiction, it's about the human condition. So even though this is a story of Mi'kmaq family,
Yeah,
everybody has family,
that's right.
right? Everybody has trauma in their lives,
Yeah,
some of it unresolved. So people can identify even if they don't really understand who the Mi'kmaq are.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and even some of those really deep themes of identity.
Hmm.
Hell, who among us the older we get aren't really searching for like the source material of like, who am I and what is my deal and what is my family and what are my
Hmm.
instincts and what's the story that lives in my bones and in my genetics,
Yeah.
and so obviously we can overlay our own stories with yours here
Hmm.
and have real compassion. Like, particularly when I think about Norma, who just
Hmm.
had this internal misalignment going, something's not right.
Yeah.
Something's just not right. I have something beyond a fantasy. It's more like a memory.
Yeah.
And that we got to watch her grapple with this deep
Hmm.
sense of cognitive dissonance, kind of in her own body, in her
Yeah.
own family. Was she challenging to write?
She wasn't, because I've kind of I'm kind of that way myself. So being a mixed race, sometimes you're always like, who am I in what this situation versus who am I in this situation? And I was like, do I even have the right to tell these stories? Because I was raised off the reserve, predominantly by my mom, who's non-Indigenous. I don't speak the language. I'm trying to learn, but like, do I even have the right to tell these? Because am I Indigenous enough, right? So I took all of these insecurities of mine and I put them on poor Norma there. So it's kind of like here you go, you take some of my problems.
Oh my gosh, Norma. Norma got to carry the weight. I'm
Yep.
curious. I appreciate you sharing that. What has the response from the Mi'kmaq community been?
It's really good.
Yeah,
Like,
I would think
although I
so.
don't know if they tell me if they didn't like it,
Sure.
but it was
Yeah.
really great when it first came out. Like a couple months after it came out, there was a women's group from Eskasoni First Nation here in Nova Scotia, and they did his book club, and I went on Zoom with them, and they're like, "We just love this. We could see the fields because everybody has a berry picking story, right? The
Sure.
older generations and the elders, and like we could just you did it so well. You captured us, and that really meant a lot to me. The fact that the Mi'kmaq were seeing themselves in this piece of literature that is going worldwide, and most like people don't even know we're still here. A lot of people have never even heard of us before, so it's really
Yeah.
nice.
No, it is. I mean, that really is for the opportunity you have to give visibility to the
Hmm.
community in such a
Yeah.
big world where that can be such it can be a marginalized story and has been.
Yeah.
And so to put it kind of on Front Street here, that's an honor.
It's very exciting, and I'm very honored that when Mi'kmaq people say, "We love this story. We can see ourselves in this. Well done," and I'm like, oh, right to my heart.
I love that for you. I'd love to hear you talk about some of the other characters and if any of them were a challenge to you or surprising to you, or if you loved another one more than another.
I don't think so. I love May. May is
Yeah.
just spunky. I kind of
Yeah.
based her a little bit on one of my aunties.
Oh, did
So
you?
just her love for her family,
Yeah.
and just saying it as it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of did that, but that was fun. I don't think there's anyone I didn't. Oh, Lenore.
Mm,
Even Lenore, I have a little bit of empathy for. Not a
sure.
lot, but look, she's the only one that doesn't achieve redemption in this book at all either.
Oh, that's true.
Right? Everybody else has
Yeah.
some sort of redemption. So I don't know. I like them all because I
Yeah.
created them
Of
all.
course you did.
They're like my kids.
Yeah. They're your own
Yeah.
quirky little dysfunctional family that you made
Yes, they
up.
are. Of
Uh-huh,
course. Yeah.
exactly.
I did have fun naming a few of them. Like Joe
Oh
was my
yeah.
grandpa's name.
I
Yeah.
wondered.
And
Uh-huh.
Cora and Leah were two of my friends from high school. And I was just like, what do these characters look like? And I'm like, well, this character sort of looks like Leah. So I put it in there as a placeholder. And then I just left them. So I did little things like that, which was fun.
Did they love that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
it was
friends would
fun.
all love to see themselves in bright lights. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think they would enjoy that. Did you? I know that obviously you had these stories from your own dad, and then you went to the fields, obviously, where the kind of the you caught the spark for the story. Did you have to spend a lot of time researching? Because this was located also historically, like in the 60s, and it was a certain set of circumstances. And, it's a novel, but there's history to it that's factual. So you do also have to be careful with the facts.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, true. I don't think I didn't do a lot of, I just listened to my dad's stories. Like, and he was like, oh, this road it used to go like this and it was windy and there were potholes. And I just listened to his stories and tell me about what it was like, Dad. So a lot of my research was, hey, Dad, right? Just asking. The only things I did research on is like, I wonder when children start to form solid memories.
Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
that's why she's 4 when she's taken because they don't start to form solid memories apparently till about the age of 7.
Oh,
And if they
yeah.
experience trauma, maybe not anything at all.
Yeah.
So I did that, and of course, there's pregnancy loss in
Yeah.
the which I've never experienced. So
Yeah.
I just went online and read as many firsthand accounts as I could
Yeah.
find, which is so
Yeah.
because I
Heart
wanted to
wrenching.
I wanted to honor the people who have experienced that. So I did a little bit of research there. Otherwise, it was just and once in a while, my dad would be like, I don't know, call your aunt. And
Oh, yeah.
there's so many of them, right? My
Yeah.
dad's one of 14 kids, so I had a lot of input there.
Yeah, I
So
bet you did. I bet you did.
yeah.
I'd love to hear you talk about some of the stories that you have since been able to collect from your readers. Because you write it from your perspective, with your set of circumstances, your family history, and your personal experience. But once you put a novel in the hands of readers, there's an interesting alchemy. It can become a whole new thing. Something you didn't intend it to, something that you
Yeah.
had no imagination for, even where readers go, "This is what this meant to me," and it could just defy like common sense. I'd love to hear what that's
Yeah.
been like for you.
That is kind of crazy. I know that I went into, so one of my colleagues taught my book in her first year English
Wow.
course. So she asked me to come in and speak to the class, and they were getting all this stuff out of it. They're like, oh, the symbolism of the names. I'm like, nope, just named after my grandpa. Like,
That's
it's
just my
just
best
so
friend.
weird. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I was like, I didn't, and I was speaking with Morgan Talty. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, Fire, Exit, Night of Living Res. I was talking to him once, and he said, writers don't write the theme, we just write a story. Like, I don't sit down and say, I'm going to write a story about missing and murdered Indigenous women and identity.
Yeah.
I just sat down and wrote a story, and by virtue of who I am and my life experiences, that is the theme that emerged. So when I did ask my American publisher, I'm like, what is going on? Why is this going so crazy down there? And she said, because I think it's the right time. It's a soft entry into the discussing some really hard topics. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if this starts a conversation, I'm happy. I'm happy about that.
Just stunning. I mean, what an amazing result to your novel, but also because it's true. Like you are writing from a true place. And I mean, Indigenous stories have been discredited and marginalized at best, certainly overlooked in literature.
Oh
And
yes, yeah,
so, I mean, you really are lighting a flame underneath a story that deserves it. And
yeah.
so
Well, thank you.
I'm not surprised at all to hear that. I mean, I can just look in my reader community, the few thousand of us, to find these interesting sparks of displacement and disenfranchisement. And so, yeah, like you've really handed a story of injustice also
Yeah,
to the
yes,
reader,
yeah.
at which point it takes on a life of its own.
And then people, like, I've seen some of the discussion questions people post online and stuff. I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, interesting. And I actually bought,
Yeah.
someone created like a cheat sheet, like a study guide. And I was like, that's not what I intended, but
Yeah.
that's very cool. Like just reading through it. So it does, because once it's out in someone else's hand,
Yeah.
it becomes something new to them. So, and I
Yeah,
love that.
absolutely.
It's,
Yeah, right. So then the teachers and the analysts can reverse
yeah,
engineer it
yeah.
and apply these, thematic questions to you sitting down at your huge laptop and just banging out a story with characters that you loved.
Yes, yeah, but
Uh-huh.
basically, and I was like, I just want to write. I always said I just want to write a story my parents would be proud of, um, and I just love storytelling, and I love writing. I love reading. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Obviously most writers are ferocious
Yeah.
readers, so I just wanted to tell a good story, and by virtue of working in my Indigenous communities and my own insecurities with my identity, which this writing has helped me remedy a bit, because of all that,
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah.
It's a pretty it's so awesome and rare to strike out with a brand new debut novel and have it, of course, succeed at these levels. How does that feel to you as you stare down the next book? Yeah.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. It's like the
Yeah,
sophomore jinx, right?
totally.
And I'm like, oh goodness. And I
Yeah.
have, it's in edit. I'm editing my new
Yeah.
book right
I
now. And
figured you
I'm
probably
just
were.
like, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. How are people going to perceive it? And my editor's just like, would you calm down?
Yeah, totally. Calm down.
Yeah, but she's like, you're fine. We're going to work on it. It's going to get done. It's like, I don't
That's
know.
right. That's right.
People are going to be mad if it doesn't live up to what they think the berry pickers, the expectations they have for it. So yeah, I'm very nervous. I'm very terrified of that. But the short
Yeah,
stories
but
came out in between.
to kind of make an on
Soften.
ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
a good writer's a good writer, and you're a good writer. And so that's exciting because now we're not just on to the berry pickers, we're on to you. And
Yeah.
so the good news is that we now know to look for your next project and what you're working on and what you're dreaming up. You know what? Brene Brown told me something once about being a writer, because as wonderful it is to have like a breakout book that succeeds, like a real spike, it can be daunting for whatever
Oh,
comes after that. And I was talking to her about that, having had a spike, and she said, "Look, we're not one hit wonders. That's not what we're here to do. We're not out
right.
here just to just be hit factories for the industry." She said, "Our job is to do the best work we can with whatever's right in front of us. That's it."
Yes. Yeah.
And is we're not up. The outcomes are not up to us. What is up to us is that for every project that we're on, we are doing our highest and best work. And I was like, great. That took some pressure off for me. Like,
Yeah. I love
whether it's a
that.
huge commercial success or maybe not as much so, if I can say at the end of it, I put my all into that. And that was my best work. That takes some of the wind out of that sail of
Yeah.
anxiety of
Yeah.
anxiety for sure.
And my even my agent, like when the Berry Pickers was being written, I said, you have to give me time because I don't want to put something out there for the sake of putting something out
That's
there.
right.
I want to be
Yes.
proud of it. At
Totally.
least I want to be proud of it. So she
Yes.
waited quite a while, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you tell us about what the project you have in editing right now?
No.
Oh, damn it. I sensed you were going to say no.
Sorry.
Well, do
Sorry.
tell us, when is it slated to come out?
I think 2027.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
How'd you find the writing process?
Well, I've had the idea in my head for quite some time, so it
Uh-huh.
took like maybe like 5 or 6 years just up here.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm still in the writing process
Uh-huh.
technically. I wrote like a whole new chapter yesterday just because I was
Ah.
like, I wanted to bring some stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love writing. I
Yeah.
love creating a
Yeah.
story. I love that high you get when it just gets it
Totally.
right? You know, that moment. And you're like, oh, that's a perfect word, or oh, that
Totally.
sentence just does exactly what I want it to
Yeah.
do. So I don't know, I just love writing. So I think I'm just going to keep going.
I just so agree. In my sort of the podcast that I host, I have a partner. She's a co-host with me, and she was saying something the other day about her worst the worst moment for her, and she's not a writer.
Right.
The worst moment is just like looking at a blank page. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I love that moment. Like, I
Yeah.
love that moment where I just can put my fingers to the keyboard and create something out of nothing,
Hmm.
and ideas and words, bring it all to, I love the blank page. So
It can be scary
it can be
sometimes.
daunting when the
Um,
cursor's just blinking there at the very, very top, but
yeah, and you're like,
then it
how am I going to
emerges.
start this? Yeah.
It
So,
emerges.
it does.
How do your students feel about you now that you're kind of fancy?
Oh, I don't think they care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Students are
There's,
unimpressed. Yeah,
yeah, one of my students was like, I got your book for my grandma for Christmas. I was like, oh, thank you.
totally.
but
Totally.
but they're like, oh yeah, just teach us. Like, let's do
That's
this.
right. That's right. We're here to get
Yeah.
our credits.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few of them. I always ask, like, especially my first year, because they can choose any professor. Like, so why'd you choose this class? And a few of them last year were like, well, I read your book and I thought it was really good. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that
But
is nice. That is
yeah.
nice. I've got a bunch of kids, as I mentioned earlier, and they're almost all in their 20s. And yeah, so praise from a 20-year-old is something. We grab onto that with both hands. It
Yes.
comes sparingly, for
Yeah.
sure. When my kids' friends are like, "Oh, my mom loves you," I'm like, "Well, you know what? That's fine. That makes
Yeah.
sense."
Yeah.
Let me ask you this before we wrap it up here. I'd love to hear your how you approach the ending. At any point, did you have an alternative ending? Did you see it going a different way than it went? Because I loved the way that you brought it home, for sure.
No, the ending was always very solidified in my
Yeah,
head. I kind of knew exactly how it was going to end.
yeah,
Same with this one I have now. I
yeah.
knew exactly. I wrote the last chapter first on this one just because I wanted to get
Oh,
it down. I was like,
wow.
this is how it's going to end now. Let's figure out what goes on.
Yep. How do we get there?
Yeah, so I think endings are good. I have trouble with titles. The Berry Pickers was just like a placeholder because I didn't know what to call it. I
Sure.
was like, I don't know what to call it. And then my publisher was like, The Berry Pickers. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I really have trouble with titles and naming my characters.
Oh, it's so funny.
That is the hardest thing for me is to name my characters.
So do you go through some iterations before one kind of feels right, feels sticky?
Yeah, I have one in this current one that I'm working on, and I'm like,
It's not
this
right.
character's gone through like 6 names so far, and I'm
Oh
like,
gosh.
I just don't know what to do with this person. Like, your name does not suit you. I don't know what it is, but I assume it's going to change again, just because even though I'm pretty far along the process, I'm just going to have to do that find and replace because
For sure.
the name just doesn't fit. So yeah,
Are you pulling from your arsenal of personal, actual relationships again?
sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then all my other friends were like, "Why am I not in the book?"
Oh, totally. Oh my gosh, don't I know that
Yeah.
response?
So I just throw their names in there for fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like a side character, the store
Yeah,
owner or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, exactly.
I'd love to hear. I always ask our authors this because, as you mentioned, the best writers are readers, of course. Love to hear something that you have read lately that you love, that you're recommending, that you're like, oh, put this on your list. Or maybe it's an old time favorite. Either way.
Oh, geez. I'm a huge Steinbeck fan. Have been my whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
I went to his house this summer when I was in California
Wow.
to get the Andrew Carnegie Medal. That's all I wanted to do was go to his house, so I got to do that.
Amazing.
But recently I read Pearly Everlasting by Tammy Armstrong. Oof,
Good.
oof, it's so good. It's so good. Like, and just the story itself, how it came about. Sorry, my dog is trying to eat my chair.
No worries.
Um,
Did you
yeah,
say
just
Pearly Everlasting?
That's
Okay.
the
Okay.
title of it,
Okay.
by Tammy Armstrong. She was up for the Barnes and Noble Award again this year. Like, it was so funny to have two Nova Scotians up for the Barnes and Noble
Amazing.
Award 2 years in
Yeah,
a row. So
yeah.
that was pretty awesome. That was a brilliant book. I'm reading one right now. It's a nonfiction called. I'm going to look it up for you because I don't want to get it wrong. And I'm listening to it. It's called All the Young Men.
What's it about?
It's Ruth Coker Burks, and it's called A Memoir of Love, AIDS, and Chosen Family in the American South. And it's just about this woman who takes care of AIDS patients so no one else will have anything to do with them. And it's beautiful, and she narrates it herself. So I'm reading that right now. So that's a brilliant. I'm not too much into nonfiction, but I do like some of it.
Well, some nonfiction like that almost reads like a novel.
It
When you have
does.
such a compelling story, sometimes you can
Yeah.
forget that it isn't fiction.
And you can just hear her because she narrates it to herself. So you're like, oh, this is so nice, just listening to her voice and telling you this such an important story and how it changed her life. So yeah, I read that. And then What Strange Paradise. Oh,
Another good one. Okay.
it's so good. I have my friend like yours. Her
Yeah.
name is Julia,
Yeah.
and whenever she recommends a book, I just go get it. I
Yeah. Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
care. And I just sent her the picture of the book.
Yeah.
Like I sent it, and she was like, "I know, right?" That was the entire conversation.
I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, great. We
Yeah,
always like capture our authors' recommendations, and inevitably a bunch of us will go and down those rabbit holes and read those too.
yeah.
Thanks for those recs. Did you read your own audiobook?
No, no.
Okay, all
I have
right.
a weird voice. I don't like
Your
my
voice is
voice.
awesome.
Oh, I
And your
don't like my
beautiful
voice.
accent. I'm surprised that you didn't. You should do your next one.
No, no.
Your
I
voice
don't
is kind
know.
of sultry and smoky. Like I'd listen to you read your whole book. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, but I don't think I want to do
I
that.
mean, it's a gauntlet to do it. I'll tell you, those 3 days of recording is
Right,
so weirdly exhausting, and the buckets of tea you have to drink just to keep it
right.
going. And yeah, no, it's a labor of love. That's for sure.
Yeah, not my jam. Not my jam.
Not your jam. Okay, well, they're going to put pressure on you to do it. I'm just telling you. Eventually, they might get you. Well, we just loved reading your story this month, and I love how much it meant to so many of us in various ways. Whether it was like family disruption, because
Yeah.
there are those themes too that have a lot of that has a lot of tendrils
Yes.
to connect with, and or like emotionally distant parents, or like the overprotective mom. There's just so many places that a reader goes, oh,
I
I
can
see
relate.
myself in this.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. I love that.
Yeah, just amazing. And so I'm watching all those stories like pop up on our Facebook group every single day. But anyway, it was universally loved in book club. And so we will be waiting for this project you can't tell us about in 2027, and we will
Yeah.
sign up to buy it, and we can't wait.
My short stories are out right now. They just came out. In,
Fantastic. Where do we find
yeah,
them?
in February. Barnes and Noble
Yeah.
has them. Yeah. So they just came out. Yeah, just in February. They came out in Canada in August, in the States in February. Yeah.
And the title?
Waiting for the Long Night Moon.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful title.
Yeah, it's one of the stories in the collection. So
Okay. Fantastic. I'll drop that link in today. Well, I'm so happy to have met you, and I'm thrilled for your success. And I was so moved by your book, and I can't wait to see what you do next. I predict a very like long and successful career as a novelist in front of you, and it's exciting to watch. So
thank you.
absolutely great to meet you, Amanda. Thanks again for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I'm glad everybody enjoyed the book. That makes me happy.
Absolutely.